Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content. Subscribe and turn on notifications. The last thing my wife did before security grabbed my arms was smirk at me from the other side of the boardroom table. Not a nervous smile. Not a look of regret. A smirk. Like she had finally watched a man she'd been quietly erasing get removed from his own life. "Please escort Mr. Vale out," she said, calm as glass, like she belonged at the head of the table and I was some unstable stranger who had wandered in off the street. One of the guards tightened his grip on my elbow. Another reached for my shoulder. Around the table, men and women I had known for years avoided my eyes. A few looked embarrassed. Most looked relieved. And my wife, Claire, sat beside the interim sill with her legs crossed and one hand resting on a leather folder that contained the lie they thought was about to bury me. I didn't fight. I just looked at her and said, "You should enjoy this part. It doesn't last long." She gave me that same little smile. 10 minutes later, the board voted to remove the man sitting in my seat, open the evidence packet I had spent 3 weeks preparing, and named me chairman. But to understand why security was dragging me out of a company I built from a rented office with 6 folding chairs and a borrowed server rack, you need to understand how betrayal really works. It rarely starts with one big moment. It starts with access. My name is Daniel Vale. I'm 42, and until last year I was the founder and largest individual shareholder of a logistics software company called ArcLight Systems. We built predictive routing tools for shipping and warehouse networks. Not glamorous work, but real. The kind of business that quietly becomes essential while flashier companies burn cash chasing headlines. I loved that about it. I started ArcLight 12 years earlier with 2 engineers and a client list that fit on a napkin. We grew slowly, then fast, then bigger than I had ever planned. By the time all this happened, we had offices in 3 states, nearly 400 employees, and contracts with major distribution groups across the country. Claire came into my life when ArcLight was still small enough that I could personally answer support calls. She was smart, polished, impossible to ignore. We met at a charity event in Chicago. I was there because a client invited me. She was there because she sat on the planning committee. By the end of the night, she had made me laugh twice, challenged me 3 times, and somehow gotten me to stay an extra hour at an event I had planned to leave in 20 minutes. When we got married, people said we balanced each other. I was measured. She was magnetic. I built systems. She read people. Later, when ArcLight got bigger, she joined the company officially, first in communications, then investor relations, then strategy. Some people warned me against it. I told myself they were cynical. I believed in her. That's the part I'm least proud of now. Not that I loved her. That I kept mistaking her ambition for loyalty. At first, the changes were subtle. Claire started correcting me in meetings. Not enough to start a fight, just enough to shift the room. If I said we should slow expansion, she'd say, "Daniel is brilliant on product, but sometimes he gets emotionally attached to caution." If I raised concerns about debt exposure, she'd smile and say, "That's why execution requires a broader lens." People would laugh lightly. I would let it go. Then came Owen Mercer. Owen had joined as CEO after a private equity group pushed for adult supervision before a possible public offering. He was polished, politically smooth, and just humble enough in public to hide how much he enjoyed consolidating power behind the scenes. He and Claire worked closely. Too closely, eventually. At first, I ignored it because I wanted to. Late-night strategy sessions. Private dinners with investors I wasn't invited to. A tone between them that was just a little too practiced, too familiar. But suspicion is an ugly thing when you don't yet have proof. It makes you doubt your instincts and your dignity at the same time. Then my own company started feeling strange around me. Calendar invites disappeared. Department heads stopped looping me in on discussions they used to bring me first. A restructuring memo went out with language I never approved. Finance began routing certain reports through Owen before they reached me. When I asked why, I was told it was to streamline executive visibility. That phrase stuck with me. Executive visibility. I was the founder and chairman at the time, but somehow I was the one seeing less. The first hard crack came during an audit prep review. I noticed vendor payments to a consulting firm I didn't recognize, Cresswell Advisory. The fees were large, recurring, and strangely vague. Strategy development, market positioning, executive optimization, useless phrases, expensive invoices. I asked the CFO about it, and he looked uncomfortable for exactly 1 second before saying Owen had approved the engagement and Claire had vouched for it. I asked for the work product. There wasn't any. That was when I stopped assuming incompetence and started considering intent. I had our internal controller pull archived payment metadata under the pretense of a compliance review. 2 days later, she called me from her personal phone and asked if we could meet somewhere off-site. We met in the back corner of a hotel cafe near O'Hare. She slid a folder across the table and said, "I don't want my name attached to this unless I'm protected." Inside were payment authorizations, amended approval chains, and a beneficial ownership document tied to Cresswell Advisory. The company was indirectly controlled through a trust. The trust beneficiary was Claire's brother. That money wasn't consulting spend. It was siphoning. I felt sick but not shocked. By then, shock had already burned off into something colder. I asked one more question. "And Owen?" She hesitated. Then she handed me printed stills from security footage taken in the private parking garage behind our River North office. Claire and Owen. Close. Intimate. Not ambiguous. There was the personal betrayal and the corporate one tied together with the same dirty thread. I went home that night and watched Claire set down her keys, kiss me on the cheek, and ask if I was coming to New York next week for an investor dinner. I remember thinking how strange it was that a face you once trusted can become evidence against itself. I didn't confront her. That would have given them time. Instead, I called my attorney, then an outside forensic accounting team, then 2 board members who still respected facts more than theater. Over the next 3 weeks, we worked quietly. We traced payments, preserved messages, confirmed that Owen and Claire had been preparing a governance action to push me out under the claim that I was becoming erratic and disruptive to strategic financing. That part almost made me laugh. They were planning to use my resistance to their fraud as evidence that I was unstable. But they made one mistake. They assumed I still thought like a husband. By then, I was thinking like a founder protecting a company from 2 parasites wearing executive titles. The emergency board meeting was scheduled for a Thursday at 8 a.m. Claire told me the night before that it was just a capital structure discussion and that I didn't need to come in hot. That phrase told me everything. She wasn't worried about the meeting. She was worried about timing. When I walked into the boardroom the next morning, I understood the play instantly. Owen sat at the far end with outside counsel beside him. Claire was to his right. In front of each board member was a packet. In front of me, nothing. Owen spoke first. "Daniel, before we begin, there are concerns we need to address regarding recent behavior, unauthorized information requests, and actions that may jeopardize pending financing." Claire didn't look at me when she added, "This doesn't have to be ugly if you cooperate." That was her tell. She always got colder when she thought she had control. The packet they distributed painted me as volatile, obstructive, and mentally compromised by personal stress. It cited employee discomfort, board instability, and fiduciary risk. They were pushing for a temporary suspension of my authority pending review. And because they'd prepared the room carefully, a private security team was already waiting outside. I let them finish. Then I said, "Are you done?" Owen folded his hands. "Security is here to ensure this stays orderly." Claire finally looked me in the eye and said, "Please don't make this worse than it already is." I almost admired the nerve. When I refused to surrender my phone and leave voluntarily, Owen nodded toward the door. Security came in. That was the moment Claire smirked. That was the image that will probably stay with me for the rest of my life. As they dragged me toward the hallway, I didn't shout. I didn't threaten. I just said, clearly enough for everyone to hear, "Check your email. The real board materials were sent 3 minutes ago." One of the older directors looked down instantly. Then another. By the time security got me to the outer corridor, the room behind me had gone quiet. My attorney, Rachel, was standing near the elevators with a messenger bag and a look on her face I had seen only twice before. It meant the trap had closed. She handed me a phone. They've opened it. The email had gone to every board member, every member of audit, and outside counsel. It contained the forensic summary, the shell company documents, the garage stills, the message extracts between Claire and Owen, and a legal memo on their attempt to remove me using knowingly false claims while concealing self-dealing and an undisclosed relationship. There was also one more thing. Proxy commitments. 3 directors who had been wavering had signed after seeing the financial evidence at 6:40 that morning, which meant Owen no longer had the votes. At 8:17, Rachel's phone rang. She listened for 5 seconds, then smiled. "They want you back in the room." When I walked in again, nobody avoided my eyes this time. Owen looked pale. Claire looked like someone had sucked all the oxygen out of the building. The packet in front of her was open to a photograph she clearly recognized. Board member Elena Park spoke first. "Mr. Mercer, do you deny authorizing payments to an entity linked to Mrs. Vale's family while failing to disclose the relationship?" Owen tried to recover. "This is being mischaracterized." "Do you deny it?" she asked again. He didn't answer fast enough. That was enough. Claire finally spoke, but her voice was different now. "Daniel, if you just talk to me." I cut her off. "You tried to remove me from my own company using lies and security guards. We are long past a conversation." No one defended them. The vote to remove Owen as interim CEO was immediate. The vote to open a full internal investigation was unanimous. Claire was placed on administrative leave pending review. Then Elena looked at me and said, "Arclight needs stability, and it needs trust rebuilt from the top down. I move that Daniel Vale be reinstated with full authority as chairman effective immediately." 10 minutes earlier I had been escorted out like a problem. Now the board was standing. Not all at once. Not dramatically. Just one by one, as if reality had finally caught up with performance. The fallout wasn't cinematic. It was better. Owen resigned before he could be terminated for cause, which didn't save his reputation. Claire's attorneys came in aggressive, then got quieter as discovery expanded. The shell payments triggered tax scrutiny and civil exposure. A few executives who had helped isolate me were let go. Others apologized. Some meant it. I stayed. Not for pride. For the people who had built something real while 2 narcissists treated the company like a private stage. We cleaned up the books. Killed the vanity initiatives. Rebuilt reporting lines. Promoted operators instead of performers. It took a year to feel steady again. The last time I saw Claire in person was at a settlement conference. She looked tired. Smaller. Like someone who had spent too long believing charm could outrun consequences. She asked me very softly, "Did you ever love me at all, or was I always just another risk to manage?" I looked at her for a long moment before answering. "I loved you enough to trust you where I should have demanded honesty. I won't make that mistake again." That was the end of it. These days, I'm quieter than I used to be, but not weaker. There's a difference, and I learned it the hard way. People talk about revenge like it's rage with a plan. It isn't. Real revenge is restraint. It's documentation. Timing. Truth. It's refusing to let the people who betrayed you also control the story of what happened. My wife smirked when security dragged me out because she thought humiliation was the end of my power. She was wrong. It was just the last scene where she still believed I didn't know who she was. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one.